Open your Bibles to Matthew 13 as we continue our study there. We're talking about parables because as Jesus talked about parables throughout the book of Matthew and talking about the kingdom and likening that with parables and this fulfills Scripture as we read there. And there we go. In Matthew 13, verse 35, where it says, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet. Can you turn me down just a little bit? Yes. Oh, I don't often say that. But I will open my mouth in parables. And as he spoke in parables, it was known to some and unknown to others. He was not speaking in an unknown language. The word parable means to lay alongside of. And so as he saw a sower sowing seed, he would lay on the side that. That's like the kingdom of heaven. When he talked about the wheat and the tares, he said that's like the kingdom of heaven. And he goes on and he's talking today about the kingdom of heaven being like a mustard seed. And as we talk about that, to lay alongside the kingdom of heaven. They didn't understand about the kingdom of heaven because for hundreds of years they were looking for a physical kingdom with a physical king sitting on the throne of Jerusalem where we would have this territory taken back from the Romans. We would be an independent nation once again. That's what they thought. And when Jesus is talking about the kingdom, he's talking about the kingdom of heaven as a spiritual kingdom. And he lays alongside several parables to show this. And so when we talk about the kingdom of heaven, in fact, in Matthew chapter 13, there are 7 parables that we are working through as he talks about the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is like this. When you sow the seed, and now we talk about the seed being the mustard seed. And with this, he goes on to say the parable of the mustard seed and the leaven. And mustard seed, it said, this is the smallest of all seeds. In the King James, it said, this is the smallest of all seeds. You may have a particular version where it says, this is the smallest of all your seeds. He's not saying the mustard seed is the smallest seed in all the world, but the seed that they were familiar with, a mustard seed is very small. I have a mustard seed here I got some years ago. Nick Blaine did a Wednesday night devotional on the mustard seed, and he gave us all a mustard seed. I thought about doing that, but I didn't think Nick would give a mustard seed to everyone here, and so I didn't ask you. But you can't see the mustard. If I'll bring it out there, and you can see a mustard seed. It's a very small seed here. And Jesus is comparing this seed to the kingdom of heaven and making comparisons about the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven that you put in bread. And they're saying, I don't understand. How's a mustard seed like a king sitting on the throne with an army out there ready to conquer the world? How's that like a mustard seed? And so he's beginning to refocus their thinking about the kingdom. It's a spiritual kingdom. It's like a mustard seed. Let's read Matthew 13, verse 31. Another parable he put forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sows in his field, which indeed is the least of all the seeds. But when it is grown, it is the greatest among them, and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in it, and the branches thereof. And another parable he spake, the kingdom of heaven is like unto leaven, which is a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till it hold the leaven. All these things spake Jesus unto the multitude in parables, and without a parable he did not speak unto them, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet, saying, I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things which have been kept secret from the foundation of the world. And so as we talk about the parable of the mustard seed, a very small seed, and you can see a man standing along the mustard tree. It's not really a tree, it's more of a bush, but it's very large. You got growing up to 10, maybe 15 feet tall. And so enough that the birds come and lodge in the branches of the mustard tree, bush or so. And talking about leaven, a little leaven, leaveneth the whole lump. We understand with that. But what are some things that we can see? First of all, we see that we have a seed. The seed is dormant at this time. It's not a tree. It's not even really useful but for being there, but it is alive. Maybe you can look up on internet, or maybe you've heard this, that they found some seeds as they were going through Egyptians and tombs and such, and they found seed and planted that seed, and even after 3,000 years, that seed germinated and produced growth. The seed is alive. The seed has potential. And yet it is just but a seed at this time, just a little seed. But there are very remarkable things that can happen from a small seed. And then you see the tree. As a tree comes to maturity, the seed is in its beginning stages of growth, but the tree, as we talk about that, comes to maturity, and the tree is useful for shade, useful for the lodging of the birds. They can go there and they can rest. They can build their nests there. They can inhabit that. And it is useful, being used by the birds and by usefulness as mankind has it also. But the tree becomes useful with this. We see the birds. The birds rest in the tree. The birds have a haven, the home they have as they come to the tree. This is providing shelter for them, providing a resting place for them. There's usefulness in the trees, not only for the birds, but birds in particular, as Jesus talks here. And so as he talks about the parable of the mustard seed and in its growth, this is like the kingdom. Those fishermen couldn't understand that. How is that like the kingdom? We look back this side of the cross, and we see the kingdom and the church, and we see God's plans, and we see it's like a mustard seed. It begins small, and it comes to maturity, and it's useful. And so we see the parable of the mustard seed. We see the parable of the leaven. You take a little leaven, a little yeast, you put it into the loaf of bread, and you take that measured out. You don't get too much. You don't want that bread to rise too much. There's the Lucy show. Y'all remember that show? Yeah? Y'all remember the one where she dumped a box of leaven yeast into the bread and it overflowed and everything? And anyway, that was, I don't have a clip of it up here, but it was funny. You know, she didn't know how much to use and overdid it, but it's just the right amount of yeast or leaven to make the bread. And there's something about you take the leaven or you take the yeast and you can see it and you measure that out. But then when you put it in the dough and you begin to knead the dough, that dissipates and disappears, and it just dissolves throughout all of the dough there. That you can't separate it anymore. It has that influence through it all. And the kingdom of heaven is like this. The kingdom of heaven has an influence through everything that it touches. And so when that leaven is there and is used and it makes that loaf of bread rise, the kingdom of heaven is like that. It's useful, influencing. It changes what it comes in contact with. We see the church with that too. The kingdom of heaven is like that. When we talk about the influence of the church and what the kingdom began with, the kingdom started small. There was this young couple, Mary and Joseph, and we know the story that the angel came to them and said, "You're going to have a baby. But Mary, you're going to be a virgin. Joseph, she didn't cheat on you. She's going to be a virgin. It's going to be of God." And began with a very small baby, born in Bethlehem, not in Jerusalem. Jerusalem, the religious capital that it was in the Jewish nation. Jerusalem that had its prominence, and it's not going to be born in Jerusalem, not going to be born by the king. He's going to be born by just no one, not even in the inn. But when you go out back, we got room back there in the little stable you can have. And Jesus began his ministry when he became a man, and began with John the Baptist saying, "Prepare ye the way of the Lord." Jesus began his teaching. And he called 12. And we've talked about the 12 who were chosen. We've talked about their ministry. We've talked about their death. We've talked about the influence they had, and Jesus began, and he began with 12. And in Acts chapter 1, verse 15, it said, and Peter stood up in there, and the names of the disciples and were gathered, and there were about 120 gathered there. At the beginning of the kingdom, beginning of the church, as Peter in Acts chapter 2 began preaching, there's about 120 gathered there in Jerusalem. And then in Acts chapter 2, after the church was established, and there were 3,000 souls in that beginning. What a great, wonderful beginning it is. Can you imagine the 12 saying, now we've got 3,000. Just think of all that we did with 12. What can we do with 3,000? And it continues there. And in Acts 2 and verse 47, it said, the Lord added daily to the church. And so it's continuing to grow. You've got 3,000, and they continue, and they were excited about this, and they taught others, and 3,000 were added to daily. So much so in Acts chapter 4, it says there were about 5,000 men. 3,000 to 5,000 men. It continued so, it said in Acts 5, verse 14, and the believers were added to the Lord multitudes. So much so, it says in Acts 6, it said the disciples were multiplied. You see, first you were adding, now you're multiplying. And it begins to grow, and it cannot be stopped, and it continues today. And millions upon millions have been added to the kingdom from this time. It began with one having a mission. Got a little poem about one I wanted to read with you. What can one do? One tree can start a forest. One smile can begin a friendship. One hand can lift a soul. One word can frame a goal. One candle can wipe out darkness. One laugh can conquer gloom. One hope can raise your spirits. One touch can show you care. One life can make a difference. Be that one. Just one. It began small. Small things that we have. And as we have and talk about small things, little things that we talk about with the church, one. Someone once said, big doors swing on small hinges. And that's right, isn't it? The doors that we have open. You don't see the hinge, you see the door. You see the usefulness of the door, but the door is useless without the hinges. In fact, big doors would be a hindrance trying to get through that door without the hinges. Be a helper, not a hindrance. Be a hinge. Big doors swing on small hinges. What are some little things God used? Moses had a rod, a staff. That's such a little thing. But whenever it was that Moses stood there before the Red Sea and that Pharaoh's army was behind the children of Israel and they were trapped between the army and trapped between the water, Moses stretched forth his rod. The rod was nothing without faith, but a rod. But because Moses stretched forth the rod, he said, behold and see the salvation of the Lord, and the waters parted, and they went across on dry ground. Moses used a rod. Gideon, we know the story of Gideon and his army, that he was going to go against the Midianites, and God said, your army is too big. In fact, if you conquer the Midianites with this army, you'll think that you did all the glory. And he said, just let's cut down that army, and he whittled it down to about 300 men. And one night they surrounded the army, the encampment of the Midianites, and they took their pitchers with says lanterns or lights in it, and they took their trumpets and they surrounded the camp. And whenever Gideon blew the trumpet, and they all gave a shout, and they broke the pitchers, and the light shone forth, and the Midianites were scattered and conquered. Just a small thing to hold in your hand that can conquer the Midianites. But with God, all things are possible. We know the story of David and Goliath. As a young lad, you had the army of the Israelites trembling in fear day after day as the giant came out and challenged the children of Israel. Who will come out? Who will fight me? And no one did. And a little shepherd boy comes up and he hears a challenge. And he says, I'll fight him. So he put Saul's armor on him, and he says, oh, no, I can't do this armor. I've got my slingshot. That's all I need. And God. Because when he ran out to face Goliath, he didn't come saying, I come with my slingshot. He said, I come. You come at me with the sword and shield. I come, what did he say? In the name of the Lord. A little slingshot with a lot of faith conquered the giant. There was a young lad, we read about the story of Jesus, as he certainly heard about Jesus and wanted to hear what Jesus had to say. And so his mom said, well, take you some lunch. I'll fix you some lunch. You know, that preacher goes a long time out there. And he had his lunch, and everybody was hungry. And the disciples said, Jesus, let's send them to town that they may go eat. He said, well, what do we have here? And Philip found this little boy with his lunch. He said, we don't have anything but a lunch. And Jesus said, that's enough. That and faith. And they fed the multitudes with the loaves and fish. What do you have? Just takes one. What little thing can God use with you? Can you say one prayer? One more prayer to lift someone up? I can't tell you what it means to me whenever you come up to me, and I've got these that come up and say, I pray for you every day. I don't take that for granted. I don't take that lightly. I know you lift up my name before the throne of God. You pray for me every day. I appreciate that so much. Pray one little prayer. Can you do it? Can you have a word of encouragement to someone? Say, I've been thinking about you. I've been praying for you. I appreciate you. Just a little note of encouragement, just a little word of encouragement to say, lift up their day. Doesn't have to be a long, lengthy sermon to say, lift you up and encourage. Just one word of encouragement to someone. What about a hug? Does that make a difference? It does to me. I like to hug. Come up, give me a hug, give me a word of encouragement. I've been praying for you. Oh, that makes my day. Doesn't it do yours too? Can't you do that? Just one. I'm going to hug one more person today than what I did last Sunday. We got a hugging congregation. I know you hug. Just hug one more today than what you did last Sunday. What about a visit? got members who are sick. We've got some members who can't be here at all. You know, Sarah Barkman, she couldn't be here for the last couple of years in her life, had passed away last week, and that she said she'd watch the live broadcast, live streaming, and she would tell me, you know, my favorite part, and I'm ready, you know, for build me up and say, my favorite part's when you preach the gospel. No, she wouldn't say that. She'd say, my favorite part is seeing the people when they come in. She wants to see her brothers and sisters. She loved it when you came to visit her. She loved it when you brought your phone so she could call other people. You're right. So a call would be next. Can you make just one call? Just one. One more call this week than you did last week to someone. And give them that one word of encouragement. Make one more call than what you did last week. What about a little note? Some people write so graciously, eloquently. They can just put in words, just in write it, and it's just so much of encouragement that you have. And some people are like me and just say, I've been thinking about you, I'm praying for you. Well, that's not eloquent, but it's powerful. But just a little note. Been thinking about you. I'm praying for you. Can you write just a little note? Go make a little visit. Make a call. Give a hug. Give a smile. Give a word of encouragement. These little things, Jesus is saying the kingdom of heaven starts off with little things. But it grows. God uses little things. Big doors swing on small hinges. Make a difference today. Be a part of the kingdom. Be that leaven. Be that seed. Be that light. Make a difference. The kingdom of heaven. We've got a couple more parables as he talks about through Matthew chapter 13 that we'll finish with these. But if you are subject to the gospel imitation, if you're not a Christian, why not obey the gospel? Why not become a Christian? Make that decision. I want to be a part of the kingdom that will be for all eternity. I want to be a Christian. I want to go to heaven. Well, I want to go to heaven. I want to go to heaven and take as many possible with me. If you're not a Christian, why not obey the gospel right now and come while we stand and while we sing?